The acrid smell of gunpowder hangs thick in the humid morning air of Guadalcanal as dawn breaks over Hell's Point on August 21st, 1942. Corporal Dean Wilson crouches behind a makeshift barricade of sandbags and palm logs, his hands still trembling from what just happened. The black volcanic sand stretches before him like a nightmarish carpet, littered with hundreds of Japanese bodies, their pristine uniforms now torn and bloodied, victims of a weapon they never saw coming. Wilson stares down at his Browning automatic rifle, its wooden stock splintered and scarred. Just hours ago, when the first wave of screaming Japanese soldiers charged across this narrow sandbar, he had squeezed the trigger, expecting the familiar thunderous burst of 30-06 rounds. Instead, click, nothing. A misfire at the worst possible moment. But that's not what haunts him now. What haunts him is how quickly he adapted, how instinctively he grabbed his machete and carved through 3 enemy soldiers in seconds, their bayonets flashing uselessly in the moonlight before his blade found its mark. The farm boy from Ohio had become a killer in the span of heartbeats. Across the killing field, Marine Captain Charles Brush surveys the carnage with a mixture of awe and horror. His 60-man patrol had stumbled into something far bigger than a simple reconnaissance mission. They had witnessed the birth of modern warfare, the moment when American industrial firepower met Japanese warrior tradition and shattered it completely. The statistics tell one story. 800 elite Japanese soldiers of Colonel Kiyono Ichiki's 28th Infantry Regiment lay dead or dying. Only 34 Marines paid the ultimate price. But statistics can't capture the psychological earthquake that just occurred on this insignificant spit of sand in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You see, what happened here wasn't just a battle. It was a technological revolution written in blood and steel. For the first time in the Pacific War, Japanese infantry encountered something that would change the face of combat forever: the systematic, concentrated firepower of American Browning automatic rifles deployed in coordinated squad formations. Wilson wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of black volcanic dust across his face. Around him, other Marines are discovering the same truth that's beginning to dawn on him. Their bars, these 20-pound automatic rifles that fire 650 rounds per minute, haven't just won a battle. They've made the Japanese Army's entire tactical doctrine obsolete overnight. The rising sun illuminates a scene that Japanese military commanders back at Rabaul will refuse to believe when they first hear the reports. "I think it's a false report," one general will insist. The idea that their elite troops, veterans of China and Manchuria, masters of night fighting and Bushido warfare, could be decimated by American weaklings seems impossible. But as Wilson looks out over Hell's Point, he knows the truth that will reshape the Pacific War. The age of automatic firepower has begun, and nothing will ever be the same. How did one weapon system change the entire course of Pacific combat? The answer lies in understanding what the Japanese never saw coming, and what the Marines were only beginning to realize they possessed. To understand the magnitude of what happened at Hell's Point, you have to step inside the minds of the men who carried these revolutionary weapons into battle. Private Walter O'Malley was just 19 years old when he became a bar gunner with the 5th Marine Division, but he already understood something that would define his entire war experience. His weapon was more than just a rifle. It was the backbone of his squad's survival. "The bar was everything to us," O'Malley would later recall, his weathered hand still bearing a small black bump of Iwo Jima sand embedded in the flesh decades after the war ended. "When they handed me that 20-pound rifle, they weren't just giving me a weapon. They were making me responsible for keeping my buddies alive." The Browning automatic rifle represented a fundamental shift in American military thinking. Unlike the bolt-action rifles that had dominated World War I, The bar could deliver sustained automatic fire, up to 650 rounds per minute when needed, or carefully controlled bursts for precision work. Each 20-round magazine held 30 .06 cartridges, powerful enough to punch through Japanese defensive positions, while the weapon's 24-inch barrel provided accuracy that Japanese light machine guns simply couldn't match. But here's what made the bar truly revolutionary. It was portable. At 20 pounds, a single Marine could carry and operate it without the crew requirements of traditional machine guns. This meant every 12-man Marine squad could have its own mobile artillery unit, capable of laying down suppressive fire while advancing or holding defensive positions with devastating effectiveness. The Japanese had nothing comparable in 1942. Their Type 99 light machine gun, designed by Colonel Nambu, was technically impressive, 800 rounds per minute and 30-round magazines, but it required a 4-man crew and was designed for static defensive positions. Japanese infantry tactics relied on disciplined formations, night fighting expertise, and the psychological impact of Banzai charges. They had conquered half the Pacific using these methods. Colonel Kiyono Ichiki embodied this confidence as he led his 800 elite troops through the humid Guadalcanal jungle toward the American perimeter. His men were veterans, hardened by campaigns in Manchuria and China, trained in the ancient code of Bushido that taught them death before dishonor. They moved silently through the tropical darkness, certain that they would brush aside the Americans with one swipe of the armored sleeve. Ichiki's intelligence was catastrophically wrong. His advanced scouts had reported American positions, but they had no concept of what those positions actually contained. They saw Marines with rifles, not realizing that scattered throughout the defensive line were weapons capable of delivering more firepower than entire Japanese companies. Meanwhile, the Marines were still learning to use their technological advantage. The doctrine was simple: 1 bar per squad, supported by an assistant gunner and ammunition bearers. But in practice, young men like O'Malley were figuring out on the job how to maximize their weapons' potential. You had to understand the rhythm, O'Malley explains. The bar could fire full automatic, but you'd burn through your ammunition in seconds. The trick was controlled bursts, 3 or 4 rounds at a time. Make every shot count, because your squad was depending on you to keep the enemy's heads down while they maneuvered. The weight was brutal. 20 pounds of steel and wood, plus ammunition, in the steaming heat of the Pacific Islands. Many bar gunners developed distinctive lean walks, their bodies compensating for the constant load. But they also developed something else, an intimate relationship with their weapon that bordered on the spiritual. This relationship would prove crucial as Ichiki's troops approached the Marine perimeter on the night of August 20th. The Japanese colonel was supremely confident. His men had overwhelmed Chinese positions using identical tactics, and American soldiers had a reputation for being haughty, effeminate, and cowardly, with no stomach for fighting in rain or mist or in the dark. What Ichiki didn't understand was that American industrial capacity had created something unprecedented, a squad-level automatic weapon that could be mass-produced and distributed throughout the infantry. While Japanese forces relied on a few specialized machine gun crews, every Marine squad now possessed firepower that had previously required crew-served weapons. The psychological preparation was equally important. Marines had been told to expect fanatical Japanese attacks, and they had seen what Banzai charges could do to unprepared troops. The bar gave them confidence, the knowledge that they could put down sustained fire against massed infantry attacks. As the night of August 20th deepened, both sides made their final preparations. Ichiki's troops cleaned their rifles and fixed bayonets, preparing for the close-quarters combat that had served them so well throughout their conquests. They whispered prayers to their ancestors and prepared to die gloriously for the emperor. On the American side, Bar gunners checked their weapons one final time. O'Malley and men like him ensured their gas systems were clean, their magazines properly loaded, their ammunition accessible. They didn't know they were about to participate in a revolution in infantry warfare. The stage was set for a collision between two military philosophies: Japanese warrior tradition versus American, industrial firepower, individual courage versus technological superiority, ancient tactics versus modern weapons. In a few hours, the jungle night would explode with violence, and when the sun rose over Hell's Point, the Pacific War would never be the same. The question wasn't whether the Americans would win. It was whether anyone would survive to tell the story of how warfare itself had just been transformed forever. At 0200 hours on August 21st, the night sky above Guadalcanal explodes in an eerie green light as a Marine fires a flare high into the tropical darkness. What the flare illuminates defies everything Colonel Ichiki expected to see, and changes the course of Pacific warfare forever. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers are crossing the narrow sandbar of Alligator Creek, their bayonets gleaming in the artificial light. They move in perfect formation, just as they had in China, just as their training demanded. But this isn't China, and the Americans waiting for them aren't the demoralized Chinese troops Ichiki's men had fought before. Private Richard Harding crouches behind his defensive position, watching the advancing enemy with a mixture of amazement and terror. "We could hear them walking along the beach towards us and jabbering," he would later remember. "They didn't even have scouts out." The Japanese confidence was so complete, their contempt for American fighting ability so absolute, that they were advancing as if on parade. That confidence was about to meet 20 pounds of American engineering genius. Corporal Dean Wilson raises his bar, the weapon's familiar weight settling into his shoulder. Around him, other bar gunners do the same, each one responsible for a sector of fire, each one the mobile artillery for his squad. The Marines have learned something the Japanese haven't yet grasped. Modern warfare belongs to whoever can deliver the most firepower the fastest. Wilson squeezes the trigger. Nothing. The firing pin strikes an empty chamber with a metallic click that sounds deafeningly loud in the tense silence. His bar, the weapon his squad depends on for survival, has misfired at the worst possible moment. Japanese soldiers are now halfway across the sandbar, their battle cries echoing across the water, and Wilson's primary weapon is useless. But here's where American training meets desperate innovation. Without hesitation, Wilson drops his bar and grabs the machete from his belt. What happens next will become legend among Marines. In the space of heartbeats, this farm boy from Ohio cuts down 3 Japanese soldiers in hand-to-hand combat, his blade finding its mark with lethal precision. Yet Wilson's individual heroics pale beside the mechanical devastation unfolding around him. Every other bar along the Marine line is functioning perfectly, and the sound they make collectively is like nothing the Japanese have ever experienced. The Browning automatic rifle fires the powerful .30-06 cartridge at 650 rounds per minute. Each round carries enough kinetic energy to punch through Japanese body armor and keep going. When multiple bars concentrate their fire on the same target area, the effect is apocalyptic. Lieutenant George Cordeia watches the slaughter through his binoculars, his Ohio-born squad leader's mind struggling to process what he's seeing. Japanese soldiers are being cut down in entire ranks, their disciplined formations disintegrating under the concentrated automatic fire. Bodies pile upon bodies as succeeding waves of attackers stumble over their fallen comrades. It was fascinating to see them bustling amongst the trees, pivoting, turning, spitting sheets of yellow flame. War correspondent Richard Tregaskis will write, describing the bar gunners at work. It was like a comedy of toys, something unbelievable, to to see them knocking over palm trees, which fell slowly, flushing the running figures of men from underneath. But this isn't a comedy to the men pulling the triggers. For bar gunners like the fictional composite of dozens of real Marines, each burst represents a life or death calculation. Conserve ammunition versus suppress the enemy. Controlled fire versus full automatic. Precision shots versus area denial. The Japanese response reveals the depth of their tactical miscalculation. Colonel Ichiki had expected to face scattered rifle fire that could be overwhelmed by mass assault. Instead, his men encounter coordinated automatic weapons fire that turns their greatest tactical advantage, disciplined group movement, into a liability. The tighter their formations, the more devastating the bar fire becomes. Captain Tetsuro Sawada leads the 2nd Company in a desperate flanking maneuver, trying to get his men close enough to use their bayonets. This is what Japanese infantry training had prepared them for. Close combat, where individual skill and fighting spirit would triumph over American softness. But automatic weapons don't care about fighting spirit. As Sawada's men charge across open ground, they meet interlocking fields of bar fire that cut them down with mechanical precision. The psychological impact is devastating. These elite troops, accustomed to inspiring terror in their enemies, find themselves helpless against an impersonal technological force. Meanwhile, young Walter O'Malley, who won't reach Iwo Jima for another 3 years, is learning the lessons that will keep him alive throughout the Pacific campaign. His bar crew works with practiced efficiency. O'Malley fires controlled bursts, while his assistant gunner feeds him fresh magazines. They've learned to coordinate with other bar positions, creating overlapping fields of fire that make Japanese movement impossible. The weapon that makes this possible weighs just 20 pounds, but it's changing the entire nature of infantry combat. Unlike the crew-served machine guns of World War I, the bar gives every squad its own portable artillery. Marines can advance with automatic fire support, retreat while maintaining suppressive fire, and hold defensive positions with firepower that would have required an entire machine gun company just a few years earlier. As the night wears on, Colonel Ichiki makes increasingly desperate attempts to break through the Marine perimeter. He orders his 70mm cannon and machine guns forward, trying to suppress the American automatic weapons. But the bars are distributed throughout the Marine line. When one position is suppressed, others continue firing. The Japanese discover something that will haunt them throughout the Pacific War. American industrial capacity has democratized firepower. Every Marine squad now possesses capabilities that Japanese commanders had assumed belonged only to specialized units. By dawn, the transformation is complete, but the killing continues. Japanese soldiers who survived the night attacks find themselves pinned down by daylight, unable to retreat across the open ground of the sandbar. Bar gunners pick off individual targets with precision fire, their weapons functioning as both automatic rifles and marksman tools. The final act comes when Marine tanks cross the sandbar, working in coordination with bar teams to clear the remaining Japanese positions. Lieutenant Leo Case's Stuart tanks provide the heavy firepower, while bar gunners prevent enemy infantry from getting close enough to use anti-tank grenades. "Leave us alone. We are too busy killing Japs," Case radios back when ordered to withdraw, his crews working with bar-equipped Marines to eliminate the last pockets of resistance. When the shooting finally stops, the statistics tell a story that Japanese commanders will initially refuse to believe. Nearly 800 elite Japanese soldiers dead, only 15 captured. American casualties, 34 dead, 75 wounded. But the real story isn't in the numbers. It's in the psychological transformation of Pacific warfare. The Japanese Army's tactical doctrine, perfected over decades of continental warfare, has been rendered obsolete by 20-pound automatic rifles in the hands of American teenagers. the myth of Japanese invincibility lies shattered on the black volcanic sand of Hell's Point, victim of American engineering and industrial capacity. For the Marines, the lesson is equally profound. They possess a technological advantage that can overcome Japanese numerical superiority and fanatical dedication. The BR has proven that firepower, properly applied, can defeat fighting spirit. As Corporal Wilson cleans the blood from his machete and examines his still-functioning bar, he's witnessing the birth of modern squad tactics. Within 3 years, the Marine Corps will increase its bar allocation from 513 per division to 867, recognizing that automatic weapons at the squad level represent the future of infantry combat. The Pacific War has just been transformed, and both sides are only beginning to understand what that means. The sun climbs higher over Hell's Point, illuminating a scene that will haunt both American and Japanese military thinking for the remainder of World War II. Corporal Dean Wilson sits beside his damaged bar, methodically cleaning the weapon that saved his life even when it failed him. Around him, other Marines are making a discovery that will reshape infantry doctrine forever. Their automatic rifles haven't just won a battle. They've created a new reality of warfare. The psychological impact on surviving Japanese forces proves immediate and devastating. Sergeant Sadanobu Okada, one of the few Japanese soldiers to escape the massacre, later describes the experience in terms that reveal the depth of Japanese tactical miscalculation. We expected rifle fire we could charge through. Instead, we faced continuous automatic fire from positions we couldn't locate or suppress. Our training meant nothing. When word of the slaughter reaches Japanese headquarters at Rabaul, the reaction is pure disbelief. "I think it's a false report," insists one general, unable to accept that elite Japanese troops could be so thoroughly defeated. But the reports are confirmed, and with them comes a terrible realization. American industrial capacity has given every enemy squad capabilities that Japanese commanders had assumed belonged only to specialized machine gun units. The transformation extends beyond mere tactics. Lieutenant Colonel John George, who will later author Shot Fired in Anger, captures the psychological dimension perfectly. "Nambu light machine guns caused me the greatest and most demoralizing fear I have known in all combat I have seen." But George is describing his fear of Japanese automatic weapons, weapons that required four-man crews and static positions. Now Americans possess squad-level automatic weapons that are portable, reliable, and devastatingly effective. For the Marines, the lesson becomes doctrine with remarkable speed. The story Walter O'Malley tells decades later reveals how completely the bar transformed Marine infantry culture. Bars never left the front lines. When a Marine was wounded on Iwo Jima, his M1 Garand, or M1 carbine, went back to the rear for repair. But if the bar gunner was hit, the weapon was handed to the next ranking member of his team, and the assault continued. This isn't merely about weapons. It's about the birth of modern squad tactics. The bar forces Marine units to reorganize around automatic firepower. By war's end, Marine squads will consist of 3 fire teams, each built around a bar gunner with his assistant and ammunition bearers. The weapon that weighed 20 pounds has restructured how American infantry fights. The impact ripples across the Pacific theater with devastating consequences for Japanese strategy. Unable to match American automatic firepower in open combat, Japanese forces begin their fatal evolution toward the fortress warfare of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The deep bunkers and cave systems that will cost so many American lives represent, in part, Japanese adaptation to the reality of squad-level automatic weapons. The industrial dimension proves equally crucial. American factories produce over 351,000 bars during World War II, while Japanese industry struggles to manufacture enough Type 99 light machine guns for their specialized crews. Democracy democratizes firepower. Every American squad receives capabilities that Japanese commanders must carefully ration among their best units. Modern military professionals recognize the BR's legacy in every squad automatic weapon deployed today. From Vietnam's M60 to contemporary SAWs, the tactical DNA traces directly to Marines who discovered that 650 rounds per minute in trained hands could stop a Banzai charge cold. The weapon's 20-round magazine limitation, criticized by some historians, actually forced the fire discipline that made American squad tactics superior to Japanese area fire doctrines. Perhaps most significantly, Hell's Point demonstrates how technological advantages can amplify human courage while rendering human courage insufficient by itself. Japanese soldiers displayed extraordinary bravery throughout the Pacific War, but bravery alone cannot overcome systematic firepower advantages. Conversely, American industrial capacity meant nothing without Marines willing to carry 20-pound automatic rifles across Pacific beaches under enemy fire. The BAR's story continues today in every military that recognizes squad automatic weapons as force multipliers rather than mere support weapons. When modern infantry squads organize around automatic riflemen, they're applying lessons written in blood on Guadalcanal's black volcanic sand. As Corporal Wilson finally rises from Hell's Point, his damaged bar slung across his shoulder, he carries more than just a weapon. He carries the future of infantry warfare. The 800 Japanese bodies scattered across the sandbar represent the end of one military era and the beginning of another, written in 3006 cartridges and marked by the distinctive sound of American automatic rifles changing warfare forever.